morning, everyone. We're going to go ahead and get started with our event today. Thank you for joining us at the DeKalb Chamber State of Education and Workforce Development. I am Elaine Armstrong, and I'm going to be sort of emceeing this event, but I'd like to kick it off and allow you to hear from our Chamber Board of Directors, our Vice Chair, who is Trevor Quander. He's going to kick us off, and if we can get our CEO, Michael Thurmond, in by the time that Trevor gives us his remarks, we'll go ahead and hear from him. If not, we'll try to work the CEO in this opening session. So I'm going to turn it over to Trevor. Trevor, good morning.
Good morning. Thank you, Elaine. Yes, I'm Trevor Quander. I'm the Vice Chair of the Board of Directors for the DeKalb Chamber of Commerce. And on behalf of the Chamber, we thank you for joining us today. We welcome you to our inaugural State of Education and Workforce Development event. So thank you for joining us. As one of the key pillars of our work at the Chamber, we recognize and respect the value of strong educational institutions and workforce development agencies to a community and its businesses. Over the past year, our collective strength has been tested by the COVID-19 pandemic. Unable to predict what will happen, we have all had to pivot. Today, we pulled together some of our most important voices from across the county to give you an opportunity to hear how they are responding nearly 1 year into this pandemic. You'll hear from our county leaders, heads of our educational institutions and workforce development organizations, parents, students, educators, and business partners. We hope you will leave today informed about the impact of education and workforce development. We hope you will share this information with others. Today's event is made possible by our generous sponsors who all believe in the power of education. Public Supermarkets, Kaiser Permanente, Georgia United Credit Union, Pharaoh's Conclave, and the DeKalb Chamber Foundation. Thank you all for your sponsorship and your support. To kick things off, I am honored to introduce our own DeKalb County Chief Executive Officer, Mr. Michael Thurman. Since his 2017 swearing in, Mr. Thurman's primary mission is restoring trust in county government. CEO Thurman, a former member of the Georgia General Assembly and the first African-American elected to a statewide office without prior appointment, is widely regarded as a turnaround expert. After fundamentally transforming the culture and enhancing operations of complex organizations such as the Georgia Division of Family and Children's Services, the Georgia Department of Labor, and the DeKalb County School District. While serving as superintendent of DeKalb schools, Mr. Thurman is credited with stabilizing the system during a governance crisis, upgrading its threatened accreditation, eliminating a multi-million-dollar deficit, and improving student academic performance and graduation rates. We are grateful to have CEO Thurman not only in DeKalb, but here with us today. Elaine?
All right, well, thank you so much, Trevor, for the introduction. It looks like we are still waiting on CEO Thurman to join us. If he can, we will go ahead and get him logged in. But while we're doing that, I'm going to skip over to our panelists because we do have an esteemed panel of folks here with us today who represent our most important educational and workforce development institutions in DeKalb County. So I am going to go ahead and start off. And by the way, I don't think I introduced myself. I'm Elaine Armstrong. I serve as Vice President of Marketing for Goodwill of North Georgia, but I also have the pleasure of serving on the Board of Directors for the DeKalb Chamber, as well as chairing the Education and Workforce Development Committee. So we are excited to bring you this inaugural event. Like I said, if we can get CEO Thurman on before we end this session, we will definitely do that. But I am going to moderate this panel, and you are going to hear, again, from some of the most important voices in education and workforce development in our county. It's going to be an interactive session. We want you to use the chat that you see on the right-hand side of your screen to go ahead and make your comments, enter your questions there. And we're going to kick it off And I am going to introduce Dr. Christa Akampora. Dr. Akampora serves as the Deputy Provost, Academy Affairs for Emory University. Dr. Akampora works with campus leaders to build the structures that enable an unsurpassed student academic experience and create a culture of inclusive eminence that attracts, retains, inspires a world-class faculty. She also is joining us today, and you know what? I think we got CEO Thurman on. So I am going to go ahead and, if we can, CEO Thurman, if you can hear me, before we get into our panel and before Dr. Akampora talks, I don't know you're on a tight schedule, so maybe we can get him. If not, you know what? I'm going to go ahead and let you go. So Dr. Akampora, tell us about Emory University. In about 2 minutes or so, what has been your response? What are you doing now in terms of your response to the pandemic and to COVID-19?
Well, first, I just want to say good morning to everyone, and thank you for that introduction, Elaine. It's great to be here today. I'm so grateful for the invitation. I will just say, many people wonder, what does a provost do? And the provost at Emory is the executive vice president for academic affairs. She's the chief academic officer for the university, and I'm very happy to serve in that role alongside now interim provost Jan Love. When it became clear that COVID-19 was rapidly beginning to spread in Asia and Europe, we had to make rapid decisions about whether to require our students who were studying abroad to return to the US or their home countries. And those were some very difficult times for students, their families, and the staff who were supporting them. And of course, we couldn't imagine at the time the cascade of decisions and plans that we would need to make following those days. Now, I'm sure most of you know that Emory shifted its classes to remote learning back in March, just like nearly every other university in the area. And if you had an elective surgery scheduled during that time, you also know that we suspended those operations within Emory Healthcare. What you might not realize is that we also had to ramp down and redirect a significant amount of our research operations. COVID-19 specific work was accelerated, of course, but much of the basic science research and other kinds of research in clinical settings had to be suspended. And this was extremely difficult for our researchers and for students who have their education in lab settings. Restarting it back in June also presented many challenges. We just never had a suspension of operations at that scale before. We now have most of our research activity back, albeit with strict safety protocols in place. Most of our graduate students in the sciences have returned to their laboratories, and we have roughly a third of our students learning on campus in classrooms, although many are also still taking some or all of their courses online. So now we're very busy making plans for the fall semester and trying to develop various scenarios, consulting with our public health experts. What will be the impact of the vaccine on our operations? That still remains to be seen, particularly since it's uncertain just how available it will be and on what time frame. Academic planning has a very long runway, so this is some complicated work that I'm sure my fellow panelists feel as well.
Yeah. Thank you for that overview. That definitely gives us a picture of the complexities that you have been having to deal with Emory University, particularly with the healthcare component and having Emory Hospital connected. I'm going to go back to CEO Thurman very briefly because I know he's on a tight timeline. Thank you so much, CEO Thurman. We're glad you're here. If you want to go ahead and just welcome us to this event, and I'm glad to see you this morning.
Thank you, Ms. Armstrong, and good morning to everyone. Delighted to support the effort chamber as you look at two issues that are very dear to my heart, of course, education and workforce development. Delighted to see you have a distinguished panel who will provide insight and vision and hopefully direction as we continue to address what is a two-pronged crisis, a health crisis, as well as an economic crisis precipitated this insidious COVID. Thank you all for the outstanding work that you have done and are doing and will continue to do on behalf of the citizens of DeKalb, the state of Georgia, and of course here in the United States of America. As we think about workforce development and education, as I say, I've spent most of my public career working in these two areas, and I see Superintendent Watson Harris, President Holston, and I use them as an example of an initiative we implemented last summer, which is the DeKalb Career Academy. They were key partners in that. We provided jobs for over 800 young people, 14 to 24 in DeKalb County. And interestingly enough, the pandemic presents challenges, but historically we had provided about 300 to 400 jobs. Pandemic, we actually doubled the number of young people who earned $9 an hour, received education and skills training, because we did it on a virtual platform, thanks to the DeKalb School District and President Holston. So thank you all so much for that. I see Mr. Parker, we're working on an initiative right now. They do great work with their career academy. And look, I go back to the Great Recession back in 2008 and 9 and 10. And I was at the first ribbon cutting for Goodwill's Career Academy. Opened up the first one, I think it may have been in Augusta, Georgia. And now they have a statewide network of some outstanding resources, people, and access that will help Georgians get back to work as quickly as possible. So thank you so much for allowing me to come and to participate. And I leave you with this, we think about work, and obviously it generates income so we can support ourselves and our families. But work has value that extends beyond the paychecks that we earn. There is dignity in work. It allows us to define who we are, and more importantly, to actualize our dreams, our hopes and ambitions. Nothing is more important as a person develops his or her concept for themselves than to have the pride of being able to earn an honest day's pay in exchange for an honest day's work. So thank you so much. You know that DeKalb County will continue to be a partner with the Chamber, as with your partners who are participating today. Thank you.
Thank you, CEO Thurman. We appreciate your time this morning. Know you're a busy person. So again, thank you so much for the partnership and the words that you have brought to us today. All right, so I'm going to continue going on with our panelists. And next I'd like to introduce Dr. David Duty, who is the Superintendent and Chief Executive Officer of the City Schools of Decatur. With the support of the school board, Dr. Duty developed a district strategic plan focused on 3 key areas: accelerating student learning, advancing racial equity, and building a positive culture and climate. He has fostered an environment where the success of all students is at the center of every district decision. Dr. Duty, would you please share with us a little bit about your response and the school system's response to the COVID-19 pandemic? If you could give us about 2 or 3 minutes on that.
You bet. Thanks, Ms. Armstrong. Good morning, everybody. It's a pleasure to be here today. Just a quick little bit, just to give you some context of City Schools of Decatur. So we have 10 schools, so we're much smaller than DeKalb County schools, and we serve about 6,000 students. And so I will never forget Friday the 13th, March 13th, 2020 was the first day that we closed for the pandemic. And at the time I remember saying, I really hope we'll be open by spring break, which was in April. And little did we anticipate that now almost a year later, we are still almost all virtual. So it has been a very challenging time for us, like many on there. One of the things I'd like to highlight, though, is just how it has allowed us to be really innovative. And we have just really had to rethink education and really focus on what is important and what actually matters to students. And so, like most school districts, we transitioned to virtual learning. And I shared at the time, I think it was maybe this summer, I shared that we were building the plane as we're flying it, and everybody knows that saying. But then halfway through it, we realized we needed a boat, not a plane, right? And so we just really, and that happened again and again, and you just had to keep pivoting as we learned more about the virus, as we learned more about how to keep people safe, as we learned more about what was effective with virtual education and what wasn't, and as we learned more about the mental health needs of our kids and what that meant when they're in this virtual environment. So we have, like everybody here, we have had to pivot multiple times. We have had to create whole new structures and rebuild the entire school district infrastructure multiple times. And it has been quite a challenging time. We luckily in DeKalb County, we have amazing educators throughout all of our systems, and they have been very good at jumping in and figuring these things out and determining how we can move forward. So we're still dealing with a lot, like with a lot of folks, we're dealing with massive financial issues because funding has been cut. And at the same time, expenses are going up considerably. And so we're working through those challenges, but, and you know, we'll get into a lot more detail, I'm sure, in the questions, but that's kind of an overview of kind of where we started and where we are. And I'm excited to be a part of the panel today. So thank you for the invitation.
Absolutely. Thank you. I love your analogy about flying the plane, but needing a boat. I mean, I think that is apropos for a lot of us in understanding and applying innovation to what has been a crisis. I'm going to turn over to Dr. Tavarez Holston. He serves as the president of Georgia Piedmont Technical College. Dr. Holston is committed to inspiring and equipping and mentoring leaders, as evidenced by his establishment of GPTC's Leader College for faculty and staff. Dr. Holston focuses on creating unforgettable learning experiences that are relevant for the needs of the workforce at GPTC and its surrounding communities, businesses, and industries in DeKalb, Newton, and Rockdale counties. Dr. Holston, will you go ahead and share with us a little bit about GPTC's response to the pandemic and sort of where you are now?
Absolutely. I'll be delighted to. Thanks for the opportunity to join this panel and to be among my colleagues. One of the things that's very important to me is to know that we're all in this together. We're all experiencing the same things, the same challenges, and we're all trying to navigate these tumultuous seas together. And much like my colleagues have said, you know, we are flexing, learning to be a little bit more adaptable. The pandemic has definitely changed the way that we learn and facilitate learning here at Georgia Piedmont Tech. You know, the basic is sick people stay home because sick people don't learn well. And so making sure that we're being safe, that our faculty and staff are safe, that our students are safe, that is of paramount importance to us. I will say that because we are a technical college, occupational and hands-on learning is a part of our DNA. Our students learn by doing. And so, yes, we've shifted to virtual instructional methods where it makes sense. But we've also had to look at how do we get back to that, some of those more smaller environments where we interact with our students one-to-one and in much smaller groups where we've had to continue. I will say that because of the nature of the type of education we provide, our students, a lot of our health students are still in their clinicals. You know, if they want to be a paramedic tech, they're still doing ride-alongs. They're experiencing all of the fullness of this pandemic along with our first responders. Because my guess is you don't want our nurses for the first time poking you with a syringe when they've watched, you know, some virtual learning kind of, that's not what any of us want. We want to make sure that our folks, our students are really being prepared to actually have those skills demonstrated, watched and repeated so that learning kind of takes place. So that once our practitioners, our people, our students go into their jobs, they know exactly what they're doing. Because, you know, and I'm talking about healthcare because they're always at the forefront of my mind as we've kind of navigated, you know, this pandemic. And of course, educators or anyone on the front lines, And so things that we've done here at the college, we've done a lot of things that I'm sure our colleagues have done. We've installed thermal cameras with temperature checks. We've updated our air filtration systems. We've done the regular things. If sometimes, I kind of experience Zoom fatigue sometimes and video conferencing fatigue. But one of the benefits is I get to see your faces without masks. So of course we're enforcing masks and social distancing and all those things. But in the midst of this, we've been very cautious and very deliberate in our response of how we return to campus, even in those instances where we are in those limited lab situations, and we're making sure that we're being safe. That we're limiting just the number of people that are on campus. And I can't tell you, I can't wait to see our students walking through the halls again, asking them how they're doing, what they're learning, and having them bubble with that excitement. But we can't do that until we know it's safe to do so, and that, everyone is taken care of. So our response has been much like. So again, I'm looking forward to continue this conversation throughout the panel.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much, Dr. Holston. I appreciate that. And love for you to dig into a little bit more about your healthcare students and what they've been doing sort of on the front lines of learning in this. I'm going to turn over to Dr. Nancy Croft, and she serves as the Dean of Georgia State University's Perimeter College, one of the largest associate degree granting colleges in the nation. As Dean, Dr. Croft is the executive officer for the college and is responsible for academic, administrative, research, and service functions. She assumed the Perimeter role in February of 2019, before which she was Dean of Georgia State's Burdine F. Lewis College of Nursing and Health Professions, so she knows a little bit about these times. Dr. Croft is a professor of social work, is a gerontologist, and has more than 100 publications on aging relating topics. Dr. Croft, will you give us a really brief sort of overview of what's going on at Georgia State University at Perimeter College? Welcome.
Thank you for inviting me, and I'm happy to do that. First of all, many of you probably know Perimeter College by its previous iterations. One was, of course, DeKalb Community College, Georgia Perimeter College, and then 5 years ago, we were consolidated with Georgia State University, being now the largest university in Georgia and one of the largest in the nation with 54,000 students. I'll say that my college alone is about 15,000 students, and we have 5 campuses, 3 of which are in DeKalb County, but we're also in North Fulton and Newton. And so trying to manage a college this large, and it's such a decentralized college, has had, a number of challenges. I'm pleased to say I think we've managed them well because of the resilience of our faculty, staff, and students. But like Superintendent Duday said, March the 13th was the last day that we were on campus. And we shut our doors and said to our faculty, you have 2 weeks to migrate your classes online. And I just want to give you an example of a class that did it incredibly well. You think about biology and biology labs. How do you go to an online format? Well, one of our faculty members found a biodiversity project in Africa that was running where students were helping researchers look for plant life and animal life that had come back to a national park in Africa that had been decimated by civil war. So our students actually had a responsibility to man a camera station and log in. What were they seeing? Some saw lions, some saw other forms of life, and they added this data to a worldwide database that's being analyzed by scientists, again, to see what's happening in that part of the world. What a great learning experience. But to come up with that in 2 weeks was just an incredible, feat of creativity and innovation. And our students, again, meant much credit to them. I don't know if you're aware of our student population, but Georgia State graduates more African-American students with bachelor's degrees than any other college or university in the nation. And so we're very proud of the diversity of our student population. We at Perimeter are a predominantly African-American student population, with 46% of our students being African-American. Only 22% of our students are white. And we know that in this pandemic, communities of color have disproportionately borne the negative outcomes, physically, socially, economically. And so many of our students really struggled to stay in the classroom. We were fortunate to get a good amount from the initial CARES Act funding that came in. We received about $40 million. And the majority of that, over 50%, went directly to students so they could pay tuition. We bought things like technology resources so they can stay in the classroom. And I'm pleased to say that our graduation rate actually went up last May. So I thought that we, again, demonstrated a good resilience with our students. We, like Emory, are looking towards the fall. I hope the vaccine will allow us to be more face-to-face. Currently, we're at about 30% of on-campus classes. The rest are being done online. And because we are the two-year institution as part of Georgia State, I'd say that our students are more disadvantaged because I really believe that first-year students who are starting higher education need the kind of support and connection that comes from being in the classroom, that comes from being on campuses where they can grow their leadership potential in other ways. And so getting them back is really an important part of what we're doing in preparation for being post-COVID. So I'm happy to talk more about it in the question and answers. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much for that overview, Dr. Croft. And then the example of how the students were applying that learning right here, during everything that's going on. I appreciate that example. I'm going to turn over to someone I know very well, my boss, Mr. Keith T. Parker. Keith serves as president and CEO of Goodwill of North Georgia, one of the largest nonprofit organizations in the Southeast. Our territory spans a 45-county territory. We've got 65 stores, 54 donation centers, and 13 career centers. Goodwill employs over about 3,000 team members who are all across North Georgia who play an important role in supporting our work and operations and our career services. Our mission is to put people to work, and we achieve that through the revenue generated on our stores. Last year, we helped more than 27,000 North Georgians find a job, establishing us as one of the most successful workforce development agencies in the state of Georgia and the Southeast. I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Keith Parker. Keith, will you give us an example of Goodwill's response and how we've been faring during the pandemic?
Yes, well, good morning, and great to see such a vibrant group so early in the morning. And, I always start off these type presentations by asking the question, how many of you in the audience on the panel have either donated to or shopped at a Goodwill? And I almost always get 100% response on that because people really do know the Goodwill stores. In fact, as Elaine mentioned, we have so many stores now, we actually have passed Target. Our retail footprint is greater than that of Target in the North Georgia area. But we take those profits and use it to do something that not very many people do know about, and that is to fulfill our mission of putting people to work. We have 13 career centers throughout North Georgia where free of charge, any person can walk in a judgment-free zone, and we will help them from just minor interactions such as reviewing their resume, helping them with some interview skills, all the way to wraparound services for people who may find themselves homeless, find themselves drug addicted, and everything in between, and help them go through an approach that we call the ABC approach of first finding a job, a better job, and then onto a career. And we know to truly help that person get to see the career component, you can't do that without education. So we have some vibrant, really, really creative education components in our litany of services. One of them focuses on high school students called Youth Employment Services, where we partner with several dozen local high schools in helping students deal with all the different things that go through life. In schools that may have literally a 75% graduation rate, those who join with us graduate at more than 97%. With technical colleges, we have a number of programs with over a dozen technical colleges in the Goodwill network, where students typically, as Mr. Holston can attest, graduate in that 15 to 25% range. Those who partner with Goodwill graduate at over 80%. And we're doing this with in a number of different creative ways, but more than anything else, we meet people where they are and help them find success in their reality, not try to bring our approach and force it on them. So with that, I will turn it back over to Elaine and look forward to the Q&A period. Thank you.
Thank you, Keith. So I am going to round our panel out by introducing Superintendent Cheryl Watson-Harris. Superintendent Watson-Harris is the Superintendent and Chief Executive Officer of DeKalb County School District. She is bringing nearly 3 decades of experience and success to DeKalb County schools, both in and out of the classroom. Throughout her 26-year career as an educator, administrator, and community leader, she has demonstrated outstanding skills and knowledge of teaching, learning, and professional development and policy institution, as well as collaborative leadership style that she consistently strives for, including excellence. Superintendent Watson-Harris, give us a little overview of the school district's response to COVID-19 and what's going on.
Thank you so much for that, and good morning to everyone. And thank you for having me today. It's wonderful to be in community with such incredible leaders that are committed to education, workforce development, and most importantly, are scholars and leaders of tomorrow. I'm already inspired by the powerful ideas expressed this morning, so thank you so much. Here in DeKalb County School District, and we have over 140 sites, our North Star is really our vision for the DeKalb County school graduate. And whether that be to attend, excel, and graduate from college, enter a family-sustaining career via our extraordinary CTAE pathways, or to enter the military. Our only mission is to accelerate student performance and to ensure that we remove any barriers that negatively impede our scholars' progress along what we call their pathway to their preferred future. And we can say, as all my colleagues have noted, that this pandemic has presented many barriers. There's so much that we can say about the current state of education during this unprecedented time, but simply put, it's been a challenge that has illuminated the inequities that have existed in our communities for decades. Whether this be food insecurities, access to supports outside of the classroom, or what has been coined as the digital divide. But during this time, I've also witnessed the deep commitment, passion, creativity, and innovation of our teachers and staff who, as all of you have already shared, had to pretty much rethink education from March 13th to March 23rd, and continue to find amazing ways to meet the needs of our scholars. In DeKalb, we had to buy new technologies. We had to provide professional development for teachers maybe who weren't even comfortable or even knew what a Teams meeting or a Google Classroom was at that time. We also had to provide wraparound services and figure out how to do that in this new space, well, whether that included food distribution or much needed mental health supports. Something that you may know about me is that last spring, I was the first deputy chancellor in New York City Public Schools. So I can say that the issues that we're grappling with are the same issues that school districts all across the nation have had to grapple with. But I'm really always reminded that there's no playbook for this. There's no blueprint. None of us attended school and got a degree in how to respond to something like this. And what works for one community may not work for another. And what I love about DeKalb County is that it's so beautifully diverse. But with that diversity comes diversity of passion and perspective and position. So for us, the decision to return to face-to-face or remain in a virtual space has been extremely polarizing. And therefore, we made a commitment early on to follow the science and the recommendations from the CDC. We established an internal COVID-19 task force and an external medical advisory team, and worked very closely with the DeKalb Board of Health that has been an amazing partner. And as the guidance from the CDC has evolved, so has our plans for the school district. So last week, we brought our teachers back on February 3rd, and we're still trying to balance getting students a face-to-face option for parents who want that, as well as managing the fear, the deep fear on the part of many of our staff members. But yesterday we hosted a day in the life event where we brought together staff and community leaders throughout DeKalb to really see our level of preparation and what it looks like in the building, and the overall tone to really help get the message out that our buildings are safe for our staff to return. So we continue to advocate for the access of our teachers to the vaccine, to kind of have them prioritize. We continue to modify testing procedures, but most importantly, we continue to ensure that we're providing a high quality virtual experience, and that we're maintaining, in the midst of all of this, a joyful learning experience for our scholars. So I look forward to the discussion, and thank you again for having me.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much for that overview. I want to remind those folks who are watching us today, if you have a question for any of our panelists, go ahead and type it into the chat, and we will get to those in our audience Q&A session. I'm going to start off, though, by going to the point that you started with, Superintendent Watson-Harrison. I'm going to give this one to you and Dr. Duty, because I think it's probably, we've heard it probably most when it comes to our youngest learners. And so give us, and I think you hit on a lot of that, Superintendent Watson-Harrison. I know you did too, Dr. Duty, but if you could tell us the two or three most important things when you are balancing safety and return to classroom. We've heard a lot about, how, the disparities are, especially when it comes to our Black and Brown students or those who may not have connection to technology, and how important it is for them to be in a setting where they have the access to those things. But when you're balancing safety with that, what two or three things are top of mind for you when you're making that decision making? We'll start off with Dr. Duty.
There are a couple things. One, we're very concerned about like what Superintendent Watson-Harris referred to as the digital divide and how we are balancing the needs of our kids. And so like what DeKalb County Schools had to do, we purchased hundreds of Chromebooks and hotspots and got them out to families who needed that in order to just access the basic education, because just the format of how we were delivering the education had changed so dramatically that even families who had technology at home, they might have 3 kids and 1 computer. And so now they needed 3 computers in order for those kids to access. So that has been a huge issue. And then, of course, as we start transitioning kids into the classroom, we really have to figure out how do we figure out how to do so safely so we can have a balance and have that education available. So part of our approach has been continuing to have a virtual option for those people who that is the most important thing for them. They want a virtual option, we provide that virtual option. And for those who want to send their kids in person, we need to do that in a very safe manner. So we have extensive mitigations in place. We have a team, much like Superintendent Watson-Harris referred to, of these outside medical experts. Luckily, there's no shortage of those in DeKalb County. And so we have a lot of folks with a great deal of expertise who helped us figure out what are appropriate mitigations to put in place. How do we do so safely? How do we monitor what's happening in our classrooms to make sure that what we think is being done safely really is being done safely? And so we put a lot of mitigation measures in place: social distancing, very small class sizes, mandatory masks, all of these types of things in order to allow people to engage in the curriculum either virtually or in person in a way that is as effective as possible. So that's part of what our approach has been, to do that safely.
Thank you. Same question for you.
Thank you for that. So we have not brought our students back yet in DeKalb County School District. We just brought our staff back. But I would say two of the, I think your question was two of the things that we're thinking about in terms of keeping our students and staff safe. Like Dr. Duty, the technology, I think those were easier for us to address those issues. We had incredible partners who also stepped up to help us purchase the Chromebooks, as well as the connectivity devices to ensure that students had what they needed in that space. But I think our largest enemy has been communication. We are dealing with just such a deep level of fear. And we've tried everything, and we would love suggestions, but we have a newsletter that goes out every Friday. We make videos to show the level of preparation for our staff to return to school. But we have over 137 languages in our school district. So making sure that we're able to get information out so families really understand how to support their student at home, what we can make available to them, how they can access that. The whole idea of, it takes a village has taken on a new meaning. This idea of Ubuntu and, our humanity being connected to one another, and this level of importance of interconnectedness has taken on a whole new meaning, and making sure that our students are safe, that our staff have the right information, and that we're giving them access to everything they need to be safe and to be learning during this time.
Yeah. Communication, key to anything that you're doing, especially when it comes to a response like the one that you and Dr. Duty have been experienced with the school systems there. I want to turn to our higher ed panelists, and similar question, but virtual and hybrid classes have been around for a while when it comes to higher education. And so I think Dr. Holston, you sort of hit on this a little bit when you were talking about your healthcare students, but how are you striking the balance between how much can be done in person, particularly with those majors that need to be sort of hands-on or work best in a sort of a classroom setting, and then going back to what is maybe a virtual or hybrid learning situation. So I'm going to start off with Dr. Holston, then I'd love to go to Dr. Acampora, and then end with Dr.
That
Croft.
is a great question. And as I was hearing my colleagues speak, it was reminding me about our adult education programs. Regardless of where our students are in their literacy, we serve our students in three different ways. Through adult education, that's where we prepare them for GED, English as a second language. We have our credit programs, and then we do, of course, economic development activities where we partner with great people like Elaine and Keith. But as far as the shift, trying to make that balance between what works for students in a virtual environment versus a classroom environment, I was thinking about our GED, high school equivalency learning. It's a great example of how we've had to make a shift. Georgia Piedmont has the first program for adult learners in that situation to learn their basic literacy, math skills, those sort of things. We've shifted a program totally online, one of the first of its kind that we are aware of. And I can say that, the students are engaged, the instructors are having face-to-face interaction regularly with our students. We provided technology in those ways that we can do so to support those students, because it's already been noted that serving a 2-year college population, our students do have a lot to overcome. As a matter of fact, the majority of our students, about 70%, are people of color who are pursuing their education. More than 70% receive Pell, which indicates that they're low income. And so these are just barriers that we have to think of as we serve our 2-year college community. And like I said, adult education, trying to help those students who already have a low learning challenge in English and reading and those basic skills. We've really had to think about how do we make this learning relevant and accessible. Accessibility has been key throughout this entire pandemic, making sure that we don't even exaggerate that gap, that educational gap between, all of our constituents, wherever they have to be coming from in life, whether it's based on race, gender, socioeconomic status. So, I say all that to say that, yes, we have been challenged in that way. And I would say that, I hear us talk. We talk a lot about the challenges that the pandemic has posed for us. But one of the things that I know is anytime there's a challenge, it's an opportunity for creativity, and I think that is a testament to that. Some of our instructors, let's say, in some of our welding, I'll throw that one out there. Some of our occupational classes, they need to feel the flame, they need to feel the heat, they need to have that interaction with the torch and the metal and all of that working together. So we've had to look at how do we do this virtually. So we've come up with, have simulators, and some of our more traditional instructors, prior to the pandemic, they'd be like, I don't see how we can really integrate, what we're doing in the classroom in a virtual environment. But now the pandemic has forced us to do things that we should have been doing all along, but we've gone ahead and make those changes, and our faculty are excited about the possibilities and the opportunities that have been opened through virtual learning. We've been doing virtual learning for over 20 years now, but really, I know that I've heard a lot of people say, technology is emerging in the midst of this pandemic. I would say technology has always been here. I believe that maybe some of us need to kind of adapt and open our eyes to the opportunities that are there. I hope I answered your question.
I think so. Thank you for that. Dr. Akampora, same question for you. How are you striking the balance between what works in a virtual or hybrid setting for your students and what really works better sort of in a hands-on or in a classroom?
Thanks for that. And again, I hope you can hear me through the mask. I thought I was alone here, but then I've seen some nurses and other people coming through the room. So I'm going to keep my mask on. I would say that this is, you're absolutely right, Elaine, that hybrid learning, online learning has been around for a very long time. We just haven't had to do it at this scale, and particularly in the context of what is primarily a residential learning environment, as well as a clinical environment where, as Dr. Holston points out, nobody wants to visit a nurse who has never actually had a chance to put a needle in someone's arm. So these things, I think we're still learning, but as my other colleagues have pointed out here on the panel today, there are so many things that I think we've learned that we just couldn't have imagined. How we think about international education, the point that I raised from the start, we now know that we can hold events with our colleagues in Ethiopia, with our colleagues in China, and it can be interesting, exciting, and engaging. And so I do think that we will continue to advance those activities. Also consonant with what others on the panel have talked about, I think at Emory, we are really experiencing in a real way just the differential impact on members of our community. That includes our staff, our faculty, and our students. Some of our researchers have absolutely flourished in these conditions. Others, the setbacks have been devastating. And that's similarly true for our students. So that vigilance across as wide a spectrum as possible, I hope I carry that forward in my role as an administrator going forward.
Thank you. Dr. Croft, same
like
question
my other colleagues, looking at those areas where hands-on learning is very important, we really focused on what do we need to do to make sure that those students had the opportunity to really build competence that they need. And just an example, we have our students in nursing go out to different clinical sites. And so those clinical sites, live by the standards of what needs to take place to safely work with patients. But we offer a dental hygiene clinic actually on our Dunwoody campus. And so our dental hygiene students don't go out to clinical sites. We bring patients in. And the support that we got from our university was quite astounding. If you know our president, President Mark Becker, he's actually has a public health background. So he gets it on many levels. So we converted the dental hygiene clinic into 2 different areas. We put partitions almost up to the ceiling, allowing for good ventilation. We are able to safely bring patients in so our students can sit for their licensure exam. You know, this was really important to me because as a dean, the last thing I want to do is limit our ability to add licensed healthcare providers to the workforce at a time when we need them. And so we've done whatever we needed to do to get those students through. And again, we've had great support from our university. But beyond that, just quickly, some of the other areas that I didn't think about as much, because again, I was dean of nursing and health professions before, were things like performing arts, you know, fine arts. How do you teach ceramics, you know, when you're not together? And I have to say, again, some of the creativity that came out of our faculty was astounding. You know, I've been to ensemble performances that have been done digitally. I went to the end of the semester recitals for our students, again, that were done from their homes. And it is a very exciting time. And like President Holston said, I hope we keep some of these kernels of innovation and take them into the after pandemic chapter of our lives. Not like we're doing now, but we certainly have lessons that we can take with us.
Great points. Absolutely. Keith, I want to turn to you because sort of the entire cycle of what we've heard now from our K through 12 educational institutions, our higher ed, all sort of are part of this ecosystem where we are training those young folks to go into work. And so that's really where we play in the sandbox, if you will, at Goodwill, is that we are helping people obtain jobs, keep jobs, and get a career. But you've had to consider lots of different things. So not only 3,000 team members who work in offices, but we also have the very public-facing stores and career centers where we have people coming in. How can you explain how we've been balancing our safety, but also sort of that return to environment where we have very public spaces of people coming in and continuing to serve our folks who are coming to us for
That's
mission and
a
for
great
skills
question,
training?
and one that I have to wrestle with really every day about what things can we be doing even more to keep our public, our employees, and our customers safe, while providing the service that we know is so desperately needed. And so we've just tried to take a very balanced approach. For the folks who don't have to be in an office every day and can work from home, we are allowing them to work from home. For the store personnel, we do require them to be there, but we were one of the very, very first all of Georgia that required a mask. So before it became popular and sexy, we said we're going to require every person who comes into one of our facilities to wear a mask. It was not met with universal acceptance. I'll say that mildly. And also, we're constantly looking for new and creative ways, just like you all are, of conducting our business, but being creative. So we have been able to pivot and do workforce training, much of it online. And we've now conducted some of the country's largest virtual career center, virtual job fairs, where literally 1,500 to 2,000 people, we are getting online with employers like Home Depot and Coca-Cola and a whole host of others partnering. And so those folks can literally come in, apply for a job. Some of them are getting jobs right on the spot without leaving their homes, doing the whole thing on a cell phone. And we're making those connections. But we'll continue to be flexible, continue to try to collaborate with literally the dozens and hundreds of other partners that are out there. And, you know, one other thing I'll quickly pivot to, it's all about collaboration and working with different partners. You know, one of my other passions is education. So I serve as rector and chairman of the board for Virginia Commonwealth University in Richmond, Virginia. So it's a very similar mission to Georgia State, while also having a similar mission to Emory, because we have the state's largest health system. By combining those two, we've been able to have one of the most successful returns to campus of any major university in the country. And it's because of lots of people working together. Same spirit we have at Goodwill, we try to mimic in some of these other pursuits.
Absolutely. Wow. Partnership, definitely a key, I think, into all of the success. We're at the 10 o'clock hour. I'm going to go to some of the questions from the chats. I want to be respectful of all of your time today. And we also have our breakout sessions that are coming up. So Trevor asked, for the panel at large, many teachers and educators often provide emotional support to students in one-to-one sessions and offer students an alternative voice of reason. So what are you hearing from your teams around providing this type of support, and how, if at all, it could be improved with current limitations to sort of in-person contact? I'm going to open it up to whomever might want to answer that one first, but he asked it for the panel at large.
One of the things that happens within
Absolutely.
our school system, and I think most school systems, is the teachers set up one-to-one time with students. So when they see a need and they recognize that normally they would have like pulled that kid aside to have a conversation to say, hey, how are you doing? You look like you're struggling, whatever. They're doing those same things. They're just doing them in a virtual environment. And so I've experienced it with my own kids, where the teachers have set up a time for them to, you know, hey, can you connect again at 4? I really want to talk to you one-on-one, or things like that. So there's still a lot of that same emotional support going on at all levels of education. They're just having to get creative in how they approach it.
Anyone else want to jump in there about that one-to-one
We're doing
support?
very similar things. Decatur in terms of one-to-one checks. We've also made Wednesdays a small group instruction day where teachers can really push in with small groups of students that seem off track. That's a dedicated day. But we also have a hotline that we've established on our website. If students don't know where to go for help and they know they're struggling, they can reach us there. And then in real extreme cases, our social workers and guidance counselors have even done home visits. If we know that a student is off track or disengaged, we want to really utilize all of our resources to get them back and make sure that they know that they're valued and supported, and that there are people who love them and will be there for them.
Can I just jump in and add another part of this situation is that we are also looking at ways to support our instructors, because what we're finding is the kind of compassion fatigue that they're having. You know, you think about a chemistry instructor, for example, you know, that person, he or she was not really trained to be, you know, involved in mental health. And what we're finding is, you know, because of the caring nature of people that teach in a 2-year institution, they're there to teach. You know, adding this on, we want to support them so they don't feel overwhelmed by the kind of stories that they're hearing from our students.
I saw a lot of head nods when you talked about supporting those educators. I think that's really, really important key. I'm going to go to another question, and this comes from Brenda Reed of Publix. And by the way, thank you, Publix, for being a great sponsor of education every day, but particularly for this event. This is for Keith and Dr. Holston. How are your institutions able to help adults who have low reading levels secure job skills needed to secure jobs and careers that pay a living wage? So talking about adults that might have low level
I'll start
reading
just by saying, again, our approach is try to meet people where they are. And many of our participants come in crisis, absolute crisis, and tell us, my lights are about to be cut off, my mortgage, my rent's due, and I'm about to be evicted. I have all sorts of immediate needs. Find me a job right now. And we quite often literally find that person a job that very day or within a couple of days. But we also remind them and try to keep them and get them on a path of, we don't want you to be back next month in another crisis situation or in 2 months. Instead, let us help you with all the other things you need so that you can truly move on from an entry-level job, better job, and onto a career. And we have a whole host of programs to get them there, all free of charge and judgment-free. Our approach has always been, we don't really get into why you came to us, but now that you're here, we're going to make everything we can, make every effort to see to it that you're successful. And we partner with groups like Mr. Holston and a whole host of other different institutions where we can't be the best or the expert at it. We turn it over to someone who might be, while keeping our support services within that realm of assistance that particular participant might need.
And Keith, I think you just threw me a softball to kind of, swing out on that one. Just even thinking about just the partnership that we have with Goodwill, and Keith and Elaine, you're very well aware of this, is that our college partners with organizations such as Goodwill to offer basic learning skills for students concurrently. So if we can figure out what they want to be when they grow up, if you will, that's the question. I know our K-12 partners, what do you want to be when you grow up? If you can tap into that and find that interest of that student and make that learning relevant, I don't care who you are, that's going to keep you engaged in the educational and learning process. So, we partner with organizations like Goodwill to teach them skills, but within the context of say, welding or CNA or other high demand careers. So that's a key that we've learned in the way that we help respond in this kind of a situation.
You know what? I'd love to continue this conversation with all of you. We've got to turn to our breakout sessions in just a bit, but I want to end on a question for all of you. And I'd love for you to give me a 1 or 2 word answer if you could. This has been tough for everyone and going through the pandemic. And unfortunately, we're still in it. Things are changing every single day. And for all of you on this panel, for the 6 of you, you're not only in it as an individual and with your families, but you're also leading through it. And so it's presented a very unique, I think, leadership challenge probably for all of you, one that you probably haven't had to face before. So thinking through, if you could give a 1 or 2 word answer into how this pandemic has challenged your leadership and from that perspective, just let us inside of your minds as leaders for a second. What has this done for you in terms of your leadership? And I will start off with Dr.
For 1 or 2 words. Teamwork matters. It really, really matters. We give a lot of lip time to it, but boy, have we needed it throughout all of this.
Wow. Teamwork matters.
I'd say focus,
Dr. Croft.
because the days that are long, I keep thinking about our students, and everything that we do is moving them forward. The other details we will figure out. How are we here for our students that need us?
Keith.
The 2 words.
We're not
plan
hearing you, Keith.
And execute. No matter how short a period you have to prepare, use that period and then make sure you're doing everything you can to execute that plan that you've laid out.
Wow.
Good. I was going to say teamwork makes the dream work, but since that's so closely aligned to what was already said, I'll borrow from Jeffrey Canada and say whatever it takes.
I would say we learned a lot about the
Dr.
importance
Duty.
of compassion and collaboration.
Awesome.
Extend grace.
And round
We're
this
all
out,
trying
Dr.
to figure
Holston.
this out. Extend grace to those who we lead and those who we're led by. Extend grace.
Wow. I love those words. I hope that you all have enjoyed hearing from our panelists firsthand about their response. I know there are some questions that we did not get to, but I want to thank each and every one of you for your time this morning. I know pulling you away from any moment of your day jobs is hard, particularly as you all have things that are on your plate this morning, and I know you need to get back to. So I appreciate that. Thank you so much on behalf of the DeKalb Chamber, our business community, and of course, our entire community who is dependent on each and every one of your success. And at the Chamber, we are committed to making sure that you're successful because it makes our entire community successful. For those of you who are joining us, we thank you and invite you to attend one of our 6 breakout sessions that are going to start just in about 5 minutes or so. You can go ahead and navigate to those using the session on the left-hand side of your screen, and then you'll be able to get to one of those breakout sessions. We have one that includes getting DeKalb back to work, safety in our schools, You'll absolutely be able to hear from some of our students if you go to that panel. We also have a panel of parents to hear their unique perspective about this. And then we also have higher ed breakout sessions that you are going to be able to hear from a couple of our panelists who are here today. So I want to thank you right now. You can go ahead and start navigating to that. And if you need a break, feel free to take that. We'll be back at 10:15 to our panelists, Dr. Holston, Dr. Croft, Superintendent Watson-Harris, Dr. Duty, Keith Parker, and
Thanks for
Dr.
having us.
Akampora. Thank you so much for joining us this morning.